Imagine finding a tiny, vulnerable puppy, battered not by human cruelty, but by the relentless forces of nature. Barnacles clinging to its fur and parasites inflicting hidden wounds. What could possibly happen next to transform despair into an unimaginable miracle? Stay with us as we reveal a story of resilience and unexpected transformation that will leave you utterly shocked. On a misty morning along a rugged coastline, a small puppy was discovered near a rocky tide pool, its body marred by injuries caused by barnacles and parasites. The harsh ocean environment had taken its toll on the innocent creature, leaving it weak and vulnerable. Stranded between the crashing waves and treacherous rocks, the puppy's plight was a heartbreaking testament to nature's unforgiving side. Local marine biologists and animal rescuers soon converged on the scene. They determined that the puppy had been exposed to a particularly aggressive outbreak. Barnacles had attached themselves to its fur and skin, while parasites fed on its weakened state. The injuries were severe, and the initial prognosis was grim. Yet in that desperate moment, something unexpected began to unfold. As experts worked feverishly to stabilize the little animal, they noticed signs that defied all expectations, a spark of resilience in its eyes and an almost imperceptible, determined wag of its tail. Amid the chaos of the rescue, Dr. Emily Carter, a seasoned veterinarian with a passion for marine life and animal welfare, led the charge. "It's as if this puppy has an inner strength we can't quite explain," she murmured as she carefully examined the wounds. With innovative treatments and unwavering commitment, Dr. Carter and her team initiated a series of emergency procedures. Their mission was not only to save the puppy's life, but also to uncover the mystery behind its seemingly miraculous survival against nature's brutal assault. As word of the puppy's ordeal spread, the local community was gripped by a mixture of horror and bailee. Social media buzzed with images and updates, and soon the story reached far beyond the coastline. What had initially appeared to be a tragic encounter with nature was now evolving into something extraordinary, an unexpected tale of survival and transformation that captivated everyone who followed its journey. In the hours following the initial rescue, Dr. Emily Carter and her dedicated team worked tirelessly in a makeshift veterinary unit set up near the rocky tide pools. The puppy, shivering and battered, was gently wrapped in warm blankets and placed on a portable examination table. Every minute was critical, as the combined effects of barnacle injuries and parasitic infestations threatened the fragile life of the little animal. Dr. Carter, with steady hands and compassionate eyes, led the diagnostic process. She carefully inspected the puppy's wounds, noting that clusters of barnacles had attached themselves not only to its fur, but had also begun to damage the delicate skin beneath. Parasites, likely thriving in the damp environment, were found around the wound margins, adding to the risk of severe infection. "We're facing an aggressive dual assault here," she explained to her team, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to act quickly to remove the barnacles, treat the parasitic infection, and stabilize its condition." As the veterinary team set to work, they employed a combination of gentle mechanical removal and careful chemical treatments designed for the delicate skin of a small animal. The process was painstaking. Each barnacle had to be detached without causing further trauma, and every trace of parasitic infestation had to be addressed with precision. During the procedure, Dr. Carter continuously monitored the puppy's vital signs, her mind focused on the challenge ahead. Outside the rescue site, news of the puppy's dire condition began to spread. Locals familiar with the rugged coastline, as well as concerned animal lovers from nearby communities, started to gather near the rescue area. Some onlookers watched with bated breath as the veterinary team worked, while others took to social media, posting updates and rallying support for the small creature's recovery. The story quickly captured public attention. What initially appeared to be a tragic encounter with nature was evolving into a narrative of bailee and resilience. Amid the bustle, a local marine biologist, Dr. Mark Thompson, arrived at the scene. Dr. Thompson was an expert on coastal ecosystems and had spent years studying the impact of marine organisms on terrestrial wildlife. He observed the conditions that had led to the puppy's injuries, the dense concentration of barnacles on nearby rocks, and the unusual proliferation of parasites likely linked to recent changes in the tidal patterns. "These are not common occurrences in this area," he remarked to a journalist on site. "It appears that environmental conditions have shifted, creating a perfect storm of factors that endangered this animal." His insights added a scientific layer to the unfolding story, bridging the gap between a medical rescue and broader ecological changes. Back at the rescue unit, as the veterinary procedures continued, the atmosphere grew charged with anticipation. The puppy, though visibly in pain, showed signs of quiet resilience. Its eyes, though heavy, flickered with a determined glimmer. "Doctor," Carter noted this with a baleful smile. "There's something remarkable about this little one," she confided to her assistant. "Even in its suffering, there's an undeniable spark of life. It's as if it's fighting with every ounce of its being to survive." These words resonated with the team, fueling their resolve to give the puppy every chance at recovery. During a brief lull in the procedure, one of the younger technicians, Lisa, carefully recorded every detail in a log. She documented the number and location of barnacles removed, the concentration of the chemical treatment applied, and the puppy's responses at each step. Her meticulous notes were intended not only for the current case, but also to serve as a valuable reference for future rescues in similar circumstances. The collaboration between veterinary professionals and environmental scientists like Dr. Thompson underscored the multidisciplinary effort required to tackle such a complex situation. As the emergency treatments continued, tension mingled with cautious optimism. The initial prognosis had been grim, but gradually, signs of improvement began to emerge. The puppy's heart rate stabilized, and its eyes, once dull with pain, started to brighten ever so slightly after each treatment session. Encouraged by these small victories, Dr. Carter adjusted the treatment plan to focus on boosting the animal's overall strength through specialized nutrition and gentle physiotherapy. In a quiet moment away from the controlled chaos of the rescue, Dr. Carter stepped outside the mobile unit for a breath of fresh sea air. Standing on the rocky shore, she gazed out at the tumultuous waves and the rugged coastline, a stark reminder of the forces that had almost claimed this vulnerable life. "Nature can be merciless," she thought, "but sometimes in the heart of devastation there's room for miracles." Determined, she returned to her team with renewed energy, ready to do everything possible to turn the tide in the puppy's favor. As night began to fall again, the rescue team prepared to move the puppy to a safer, more controlled environment for continued recovery. With every step, they remained vigilant, knowing that the battle against the physical and environmental scars was far from over. Yet, amid the challenges, there was a growing sense of anticipation, a belief that the puppy's journey, from injury to potential recovery, would soon reveal outcomes that no one could have predicted. In the hours and days following the emergency treatment, the rescue scene at the rocky coastline grew into a flurry of activity and new challenges. While Dr. Emily Carter and her team continued to monitor the puppy's recovery, a series of conflicts and interactions began to emerge, hinting at deeper complications that would shape the course of the story. News of the puppy's dramatic condition and the subsequent rescue spread rapidly through local media and social networks. As updates posted online garnered thousands of views, concerned citizens began to weigh in with theories and demands for answers. Some viewers questioned how environmental factors had led to such an unusual outbreak of barnacles and parasites, while others expressed admiration for the dedicated rescue team. Social media debates ignited heated discussions about climate change, coastal pollution, and the health of marine ecosystems. Local environmental activist groups took notice and started organizing protests demanding stricter controls on coastal industries. These groups argued that the harsh environmental conditions contributing to the puppy's injuries were symptomatic of larger ecological issues that required urgent attention. Meanwhile, at the rescue unit, Dr. Carter was forced to confront internal challenges. Although her primary focus remained on saving the puppy, logistical issues soon emerged. The delicate chemical treatments needed to remove the barnacles were in limited supply, and some of the specialized medications were running low due to unexpected demand. Hospital administrators grew increasingly concerned about resource allocation, fearing that an overemphasis on this high-profile case might divert funds from other critical emergencies. In a tense meeting with hospital management, Dr. Carter defended the importance of this rescue not only as a compassionate act, but as a wake-up call about broader environmental hazards. Saving this puppy is not just about one animal. It's about drawing attention to the dangerous conditions affecting our coastlines and wildlife, she argued passionately. Her words, though well received by some, also sparked friction with cost-conscious administrators who questioned the allocation of limited resources. Outside the hospital, the puppy's condition continued to draw attention from both local authorities and scientific experts. Dr. Mark Thompson, the marine biologist who had earlier examined the tide pools and barnacle clusters, now took a more active role, collaborating with environmental agencies. Dr. Thompson began collecting water and sediment samples from the area, hoping to determine whether a recent chemical spill or other industrial accident had contributed to an abnormal growth of parasites and barnacles. His research meetings, held at the local university, attracted both academic interest and community concern. "There's something off here," he stated in one interview. "The density of barnacles and parasites is not typical for this stretch of coastline. We must consider that human activity might have disrupted the natural balance." Amid these external pressures, a new personal conflict began to affect Dr. Carter. While tending to the puppy's fragile state, she started receiving anonymous emails from a group calling themselves the Coastal Guardians. The emails contained both supportive messages and ominous warnings that questioned whether the rescue was being used to distract from a larger concealed industrial cover-up. One email read, "The injuries you see are just the beginning. Look deeper into the water and you'll find evidence that our shores are being poisoned for profit." These messages unsettled Dr. Carter and her team as they introduced the possibility that the environmental crisis was not merely a natural anomaly, but might be linked to deliberate human interference. As tension mounted, the community's response became even more divided. Some local residents, outraged by the perceived negligence of coastal industries, began to organize public forums and beach cleanup events, demanding government accountability. At one such forum, heated debates broke out between longtime fishermen and representatives of industrial companies. The fishermen claimed that the deteriorating coastal conditions had cost them livelihoods and endangered marine life, while the industrial representatives argued that stringent regulations would jeopardize economic stability. The clash of these interests added another layer of conflict, forcing community leaders to mediate between environmental concerns and economic realities. Back at the rescue unit, the puppy, now showing subtle signs of recovery, was moved to a dedicated veterinary facility for long-term care. Dr. Carter closely monitored its progress, documenting every improvement in Bailey's of publishing a comprehensive case study. However, even as the puppy's heart rate stabilized and its eyes began to brighten, there remained an undercurrent of uncertainty. The treatment protocol, once heralded as innovative, now faced scrutiny from peers who questioned whether the environmental factors could lead to recurring outbreaks if not addressed at the source. Officer Rivera, who had initially discovered the injured puppy, continued his patrols with a renewed sense of purpose. His nightly visits to the area were now accompanied by quiet observations of unusual activities. Shadowy figures near the tide pools, unmarked trucks parked along the beach at odd hours, and whispered conversations among local vendors about strange occurrences at the water's edge. These observations deepened his suspicion that there was more to the story than a mere natural disaster, and he resolved to work closely with Dr. Thompson and environmental authorities to uncover any potential links to industrial malfeasance. In the midst of all these developments, the local media, led by an increasingly investigative Olivia Reed, began to piece together the various narratives into a sprawling, interconnected saga. Reed's blog posts, enriched with interviews from community members, scientists, and hospital staff, portrayed a picture of a community on the brink of both ecological and social upheaval. Her writing captured the complexity of the situation. A tiny puppy, injured by the natural elements, had become the unlikely catalyst for a broader investigation into environmental negligence and corporate malfeasance. As night fell again over the rugged coastline, Dr. Carter, Officer Rivera, and Dr. Thompson gathered for an impromptu meeting to review their findings. With piles of data, photographs, and witness statements spread out on a weathered table, they discussed the next steps. "We have to follow every lead, no matter how small," Dr. Thompson urged. "If we can establish a clear connection between these environmental changes and human activity, we might not only save this puppy, but prevent further harm to our entire ecosystem." Their collective determination resonated in the room, setting the stage for the next phase of the investigation, one that promised to shake the foundations of both the local industry and community governance. Just as Dr. Emily Carter's team was making steady progress in stabilizing the injured puppy, a shocking twist emerged that would upend everything they had assumed about the case. One crisp morning, while re-evaluating the rescue site along the rugged coastline, Dr. Carter noticed something peculiar on a tide pool rock that had been partially obscured by seaweed and driftwood. Embedded in the rough surface was a small, corroded metal capsule bearing a faded company logo, a logo that, after a brief search, was identified as belonging to one of the region's largest chemical manufacturers. Intrigued and alarmed, Dr. Carter carefully retrieved the capsule. With the help of a local materials expert, she discovered that it contained a series of sealed documents and a sample of a chemical residue not normally found in natural coastal environments. The documents revealed that a recent accidental spill had occurred at a nearby industrial facility, an incident that had been quietly covered up by the company. Even more startling was the chemical analysis. The residue showed properties that could accelerate the growth of marine organisms, including barnacles and parasitic species, far beyond their normal rates. Dr. Carter's mind raced with the implications. The aggressive colonization of barnacles on the puppy and the unusual surge in parasites, initially attributed solely to the harsh conditions of the coastline, now appeared to have an unnatural catalyst. The chemical spill, it seemed, had created a toxic cocktail in the water that disrupted the local ecosystem. This spill had allowed barnacles to proliferate at an alarming rate and had increased the parasite load in the surrounding environment, directly contributing to the severe injuries seen on the puppy. Realizing that this revelation had far-reaching implications, Dr. Carter immediately convened an emergency meeting with her team, including marine biologist Dr. Mark Thompson and local environmental expert, Ms. Laura Jensen. "This isn't just a case of nature doing its worst," Dr. Carter explained, her voice trembling with urgency. "It appears that a chemical spill is fueling an environmental disaster, one that not only endangered this puppy, but could be affecting all coastal wildlife." Dr. Thompson confirmed that the levels of pollutants found in the residue were indeed abnormal for the area, suggesting deliberate contamination rather than a natural phenomenon. As the news spread within the rescue unit, tension mounted. The initial assumption that the puppy's injuries were a tragic accident of nature was now shattered by evidence of industrial negligence. The team realized that the spill's impact might be far more widespread than they had feared. Local authorities, previously unaware of any incident, were now forced to launch a full-scale environmental investigation. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, community outrage began to build as the cover-up was exposed. The twist deepened further when Dr. Jensen revealed that the chemical in question was known to have unpredictable effects on living organisms. Laboratory studies had shown that even low concentrations of the substance could compromise immune systems, making animals more susceptible to parasitic infestations and opportunistic infections. In the case of the puppy, the weakened condition likely made it an easy target for aggressive barnacle colonization, while the altered water chemistry provided a perfect breeding ground for harmful parasites. Amid the unfolding drama, a local whistleblower, a former employee of the chemical manufacturer, stepped forward with damning testimony. In an exclusive interview with Olivia Reed, the investigative journalist covering the story, the whistleblower detailed how management had intentionally minimized the spill's impact and concealed its aftermath to protect corporate interests. They knew that releasing this information would mean huge fines and possibly shutting down operations, the whistleblower said in a hushed tone. So they swept it under the rug, hoping that nature would take care of it. But nature didn't. It only made things worse. This revelation added a critical new dimension to the case. Not only was the puppy's suffering exacerbated by an industrial accident, but the subsequent cover-up had allowed the environmental damage to persist unchecked. The community, already reeling from the emotional impact of the rescue, now faced the harsh reality of corporate malfeasance affecting their local ecosystem. The twist forced Dr. Carter and her colleagues to expand their mission. No longer was it solely about treating a battered animal, it had become a fight for environmental justice. They began collaborating with local environmental groups and regulatory agencies, pooling their findings to demand accountability from the chemical manufacturer. Press conferences were scheduled, and detailed reports were drafted to highlight how the spill had created a cascade of ecological disasters, endangering not just one puppy, but potentially an entire community of wildlife. In that pivotal moment, as the team pieced together the chain of events, from the clandestine spill to its devastating biological effects, the rescue of the injured puppy transformed into a symbol of a much larger battle. The puppy's frail yet resilient eyes became a silent testimony to the hidden costs of corporate negligence and environmental abuse. Dr. Carter, looking into those eyes, realized that this case had the power to spark significant change, to force industries to adopt safer practices and to protect fragile coastal ecosystems from further harm. With the damning evidence now in hand and the public's attention squarely focused on the incident, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between environmental advocates and the chemical manufacturer. What had started as a heartbreaking rescue was evolving into a fight for justice, a fight that promised to change the landscape of environmental policy and bring about much-needed reforms. The revelation of the chemical spill and its role in accelerating the infestation of barnacles and parasites on the injured puppy sent shockwaves through everyone involved. In the wake of this startling twist, the rescue team, local authorities, and community members had to come to terms with the harsh reality that nature's cruelty had been magnified by human negligence. Emotions ran high as each person grappled with the implications and adjusted their course of action. Dr. Emily Carter was the first to internalize the impact of the discovery. After reviewing the documents and residue samples, her initial shock gradually gave way to a steely resolve. In a quiet moment in her temporary mobile lab, she confided to her assistant, "This isn't just a case of a puppy caught in nature's crossfire. It's a clear message that human activity, this spill, has tipped the balance. We must do more than just treat these wounds. We need to expose what's behind them." Her words set the tone for the team, sparking long, intense discussions on how to redirect their focus from an isolated rescue to a broader environmental inquiry. Dr. Carter began preparing detailed reports, not only on the puppy's condition, but also on the unusual chemical markers and their probable source, determined to ensure that her work would have implications far beyond saving one life. Meanwhile, at the rescue unit, tensions were high among the veterinary staff. Some were initially frustrated by the extra workload and the unexpected twist that transformed their routine rescue into a potential environmental scandal. However, as discussions unfolded, many began to see the situation as an opportunity to drive systemic change. "We're on the front line not just for this one puppy," explained one of the senior technicians, her voice resolute despite lingering fatigue. "Our findings might prevent more animals and even people from suffering similar fates." Over several late-night strategy sessions, the team reallocated resources and updated treatment protocols to account for the chemical's long-term effects. They plan to work with environmental scientists to monitor the area and assess ongoing risks, understanding that their adjustments might help avert a future crisis. Local marine biologist Dr. Mark Thompson, whose expertise had already lent critical insight into the unusual barnacle growth, was deeply affected by the revelation. At a hastily arranged press briefing with community environmental groups, he spoke with a mix of professional concern and personal sorrow. "I've dedicated my career to understanding natural ecosystems," he said, his tone heavy with emotion. And to see an industrial spill so dramatically alter the delicate balance here is heartbreaking. But this is also a call to action. If we can prove the connection, we must hold those responsible accountable. Dr. Thompson immediately began coordinating with regulatory agencies and local environmental watchdogs, determined to secure additional testing of water samples and sediment from the affected area. His proactive stance helped galvanize public opinion and lent scientific credibility to the growing demands for accountability. Officer Daniel Rivera, already emotionally invested since his tearful discovery of the puppy's plight, now found his responsibilities expanding. In the precinct, Rivera's colleagues expressed mixed emotions. Some admired his compassion and unwavering pursuit of justice, while others cautioned that diving into environmental matters might stretch their resources thin. During a late-night debriefing, Rivera addressed these concerns and stating, "I know this isn't what we expected when we started this case, but the truth is bigger than one incident. Protecting our community means looking at all the factors that threaten it, even if it's not strictly about crime." His willingness to embrace this broader perspective helped shift the department's mindset, as more officers began to see the interconnectedness of environmental health and public safety. The local community, too, was visibly shaken by the news. Social media platforms buzzed with a mix of outrage and bailing. Many residents, especially those living along the rugged coastline, recounted their own experiences of environmental degradation and its impact on local wildlife. A heartfelt post from a longtime resident read, "I've watched our shores change over the years. Now this incident is proof that corporate neglect is hurting us all." Community leaders quickly organized public forums and town hall meetings to address these issues. At one such meeting held at the community center, Mrs. Charlotte Green rallied citizens by declaring, "We must stand together and demand that our environment and the lives it sustains are protected. This puppy's suffering is a symptom of a larger problem, and we will not be silent." The outpouring of public support spurred local government officials to promise investigations into the spill and to re-examine safety regulations for industrial activities along the coast. At the animal shelter, volunteer Carla Martinez struggled with her own emotional conflict. She had always been devoted to caring for injured animals, but now the case hit close to home. Seeing this little one in pain because of human error makes it personal, Carla admitted to a group of fellow volunteers during a late-night meeting. Motivated by both compassion and a desire for justice, she initiated an awareness campaign at the shelter. Flyers were distributed, detailing not only the puppy's story, but also urging community members to join efforts in environmental cleanup and to support stricter industrial oversight. Carla's initiative quickly drew a crowd, as many were inspired by the tangible call for change. In the midst of all these reactions, the injured puppy, nicknamed Bailey by the rescue team, remained a silent but potent symbol of resilience. As the treatment progressed, subtle improvements in its condition became a beacon of optimism for everyone involved. Each small victory, be it a decrease in parasite load or the successful removal of a particularly stubborn barnacle cluster, reinforced the belief that, with the right combination of care and collective action, even the gravest of wounds could begin to heal. In this complex web of reactions and adjustments, the community, the rescue team, and the local authorities all found themselves re-evaluating their roles. The case had transcended its initial bounds, evolving from a simple rescue into a catalyst for environmental and social change. Amid the uncertainty and the challenges, one thing was clear. The ripple effects of this tragedy were sparking conversations and mobilizing efforts that might finally turn the tide on corporate negligence and environmental degradation. As the rescue team and environmental experts worked to stabilize the injured puppy and unravel the mystery behind the chemical spill, new subplots began to emerge that complicated the situation and broadened its implications. What initially seemed to be a straightforward case of environmental misfortune was quickly revealed to be a nexus of interconnected challenges, ranging from corporate cover-ups to community activism and internal departmental tensions. One of the first unexpected developments came from the local environmental watchdog group, the Coastal Integrity Coalition, CIC. Members of CIC, already outraged by the potential cover-up of the chemical spill, began conducting their own independent tests on water and sediment samples taken from the shoreline. Their preliminary findings suggested that not only had the chemical spill accelerated the proliferation of barnacles and parasites, but it might have also triggered a cascade of ecological disturbances in the entire coastal region. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community and intensified the demands for corporate accountability. CIC leaders organized a press conference to share their data, urging local government officials to launch a full investigation into industrial activities along the coast. Simultaneously, whispers of a deliberate cover-up began to circulate within the community. Several local fishermen reported noticing unusual patterns along the shoreline, areas where the water appeared discolored and where dead marine life had washed ashore in alarming numbers. These observations, once dismissed as natural fluctuations, were now being reinterpreted in light of the chemical evidence. A well-respected veteran fisherman even claimed that he had been warned by a retired employee of the chemical manufacturer about hidden spills that were routinely swept under the rug. His account added fuel to the fire, suggesting that the current incident might be just one piece of a much larger pattern of environmental negligence. Within the hospital, internal pressures also mounted. Dr. Emily Carter's passionate advocacy for the puppies' case was starting to clash with budgetary constraints and administrative priorities. Hospital administrators, facing scrutiny over resource allocation, argued that the funds and attention directed toward this high-profile rescue might detract from other critical areas of patient care. A tense meeting was held between Dr. Carter and hospital management, during which she defended the broader significance of the case. "This isn't just about saving one animal," she insisted. "It's about exposing a dangerous trend that could affect countless lives, both human and animal. Ignoring this could mean we're complicit in allowing corporate malfeasance to continue unchecked." Although some administrators remained skeptical, her impassioned plea forced them to consider the long-term repercussions of inaction. Adding another layer of complexity, a local investigative journalist, Olivia Reed, intensified her coverage of the story. Olivia began receiving anonymous tips, not only about the chemical spill, but also about potential conflicts of interest involving local officials and the chemical manufacturer. One tip in particular included a series of emails that hinted at secret meetings between high-ranking government representatives and executives from the manufacturing company. The leaked communications suggested that financial incentives might have been used to silence environmental complaints. Olivia's reporting became a rallying point for community activists and further polarized public opinion, with some demanding immediate regulatory action, while others cautioned against a rush to judgment without incontrovertible proof. Amid these external pressures, internal departmental conflicts within the local police also emerged. Officer Daniel Rivera, who had already been deeply affected by the puppy's plight, now found his unit divided over the scope of the investigation. Some senior officers, uneasy about the expanding focus on environmental and corporate issues, urged Rivera to stick strictly to traditional law enforcement roles. "We're here to enforce the law, not to get embroiled in industrial disputes," one officer argued during a tense briefing. Meanwhile, a younger contingent within the department, inspired by Rivera's heartfelt commitment, began advocating for a more holistic approach to public safety, one that recognized the inextricable link between environmental health and community well-being. This internal schism threatened to disrupt operational cohesion, forcing Rivera to navigate the delicate balance between personal conviction and departmental loyalty. On a more personal level, volunteer Carla Martinez at the local animal shelter, who had become increasingly invested in the puppy's recovery, faced her own challenges. Carla had always been the voice of compassion at the shelter, but now she was also confronting the daunting reality that the environmental crisis could have long-term repercussions for all stray animals along the coast. Determined to make a difference, Carla initiated an awareness campaign at the shelter. She organized educational workshops for local residents, distributed flyers that explained the connection between industrial pollution and animal health, and even spearheaded a fundraiser to support further veterinary care and environmental testing. Her grassroots efforts began to galvanize community support, though they also attracted criticism from some who felt the shelter should remain solely focused on animal rescue rather than environmental activism. All these emerging subplots, corporate cover-ups, environmental activism, internal police discord, and grassroots community initiatives began to converge, creating a multifaceted web of challenges that underscored the far-reaching impact of the puppy's ordeal. The injured animal had become an unlikely symbol, not just of personal resilience, but of a broader struggle for environmental justice and transparency. As dusk fell over the rugged coastline, each group, whether they were regulators, law enforcement, hospital staff, or local residents, recognized that the stakes were much higher than saving one life. The collective efforts to uncover the truth and hold the responsible parties accountable had now become a defining battle for the future of the entire region. In this swirling vortex of revelations and challenges, the puppy, slowly recovering and quietly resilient, remained at the heart of the story. Its battle against barnacles and parasites was now inseparably linked to a larger fight against environmental degradation and corporate neglect. As each new piece of evidence emerged and every conflicting voice was heard, the community braced itself for the coming storm, a storm that promised to upend long-standing power structures and redefine what it meant to protect both nature and the vulnerable lives it sustained. As the investigation deepened and the ripple effects of the chemical spill reached far beyond the injured puppy's immediate care, a series of complex interactions and emotional dilemmas began to surface among everyone involved. These were not merely technical challenges to be solved, they were personal crises that forced each character to re-examine their values and responsibilities in the face of overwhelming environmental and institutional neglect. Dr. Emily Carter, still at the forefront of the rescue, found herself increasingly torn between her clinical duty and her growing role as an environmental advocate. Late one evening, after a particularly grueling treatment session, she sat alone in the quiet of the mobile lab, her eyes fixed on the delicate monitoring screen displaying the puppy's slowly stabilizing heart rate. In that reflective moment, she confided in her journal, "I entered this profession to save lives, but now I must confront the fact that the very environment we live in can destroy life, if left unchecked. How can I continue to heal when our system is rigged to harm?" The conflict in her words echoed the inner turmoil that many of her colleagues began to express as well. At the same time, tensions simmered within the local animal shelter, where volunteer Carla Martinez had taken a leading role in the grassroots awareness campaign. Carla, known for her unwavering compassion, now struggled with the weight of responsibility. On one hand, she felt a profound duty to care for every injured animal. On the other, she was painfully aware that the environmental crisis threatened to overwhelm the shelter's limited resources. During a late-night meeting with other shelter volunteers, Carla admitted, "Every time I see Bailey's condition improve, I feel Bailey. But when I think about the hundreds of strays that might be suffering in silence because of this pollution, I wonder, are we fighting a losing battle?" Her admission ignited a round of empathetic nods and shared stories of past rescues that had not been enough to counter the rising tide of environmental damage. The volunteers, though united in their mission, found themselves wrestling with feelings of inadequacy and deep sorrow over a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Within the precinct, Officer Daniel Rivera also grappled with his own internal conflicts. Known for his tough exterior, Rivera had been visibly shaken by the series of events that had unfolded since he first discovered the injured puppy. In a quiet conversation with a trusted partner, he admitted, "I never thought a case like this would hit me so hard. Every night when I pass by that oak tree and see Bailey resting there, I can't help but feel that we're all missing something, a larger truth about our environment and our duty to protect it." His partner, a younger officer with a sensitive nature, responded softly, "Maybe it's not just about enforcing the law. Maybe it's about standing up for the voiceless, whether they have fur or skin." This exchange highlighted the emotional dichotomy within the department, between the traditional duty-bound approach and a more holistic, empathetic understanding of public service. Elsewhere, community members already stirred by the emerging environmental controversy found themselves entangled in personal dilemmas as well. At a community forum organized by activist Ms. Charlotte Green, residents shared stories of personal loss intertwined with environmental degradation. One middle-aged man, his voice trembling with remembered pain, recalled, "My father was a fisherman. Over the years, I watched the sea change, fish disappearing, shores becoming barren, and I couldn't understand why. Now seeing what happened to this puppy, I realized that our environment isn't just a backdrop, it's part of our very lives." His poignant reflections spurred others to share similar stories, leading to a collective catharsis. However, not everyone felt this renewed sense of unity. A small group of skeptics argued that focusing on environmental issues would only divert attention from more immediate concerns, such as economic stability and public safety. Their voices, though quieter, introduced an undercurrent of tension that threatened to fracture the emerging solidarity. Media coverage further complicated the emotional landscape. Olivia Reed's investigative reports, which had steadily uncovered connections between the chemical spill and corporate negligence, began to spark public debate. In her interviews, several local citizens expressed conflicting emotions: outrage over industrial malfeasance, sorrow for the animals affected, and a cautious Bailey that justice would finally be served. One tearful interview with an elderly resident revealed that her own long-held beliefs about nature's cruelty were now being reshaped by the possibility of human intervention and accountability. "I used to believe that nature was simply harsh," she said, voice wavering. "But now I see that it's often our actions that make it so." Her words underscored a broader realization. The dilemmas were not isolated to the rescue team or the police. They resonated deeply with the community as a whole. Amid these layered interactions, every member of the network, be it Dr. Carter, Officer Rivera, shelter volunteer Carla, or community activist Mrs. Green, began to understand that this case was about more than one injured puppy. It was about confronting the painful interplay between human neglect and environmental decay. Each emotional dilemma, every internal conflict, and all the personal stories shared at community meetings formed a complex mosaic of Bailey, despair, and the relentless desire for change. As the investigation continued and the injured puppy slowly showed signs of recovery, the collective realization set in that the battle for environmental justice was as much a fight for the soul of the community as it was a matter of animal rescue. The questions they all faced about responsibility, compassion, and the true cost of progress would soon drive the next phase of their quest for truth. As dusk fell over the rugged coastline once again, a palpable sense of foreboding began to envelop the rescue site. The earlier revelations, the chemical spill, the accelerated growth of barnacles, and the surge of parasites had set the stage for a much larger mystery. In the days following the initial treatments, a series of strange, unexplained events and anonymous warnings began to surface, amplifying the tension and hinting at a deeper, more sinister connection behind the environmental disaster. One overcast evening, as Dr. Emily Carter was reviewing the latest laboratory results with her team, an urgent call came in from a local fisherman. Mr. Roberto Silva, known for his intimate knowledge of the coastline, reported that while out on his boat, he had witnessed an unmarked truck parked near a restricted industrial area, an area rumored to have been the site of previous chemical spills. "I saw the truck idling, lights off, and then it drove away just as quickly as it appeared," he recalled in a shaky voice. This eyewitness account, though brief, raised questions. Was this truck involved in the current spill, or was it connected to a pattern of covert activities along the shore? Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Rivera, whose initial discovery of the injured puppy had already stirred a wave of community concern, received a cryptic text message late one night. The message, sent from an unknown number, simply read, "Look beneath the surface, there's more here than meets the eye." Rivera's brow furrowed as he considered the implications. The message seemed to suggest that the chemical spill was not a one-off accident, but rather part of a deliberate, ongoing cover-up orchestrated by powerful interests. This anonymous tip injected a fresh surge of determination into his investigation, prompting him to expand his patrol routes to include areas he had previously overlooked. At the local animal shelter, volunteer Carla Martinez began to notice a disturbing trend. In addition to the increasing number of strays exhibiting symptoms similar to Bailey's, there were reports of animals with inexplicable skin lesions and unusual growths, even among those rescued from inland areas. Carla received an email from a shelter worker in a neighboring town, warning that they had encountered several animals with signs of chemical burns and abnormal parasitic infections. The email, laced with urgency, ended with the stark message, "The spill might be spreading. We need answers before it's too late." These reports, when combined with the earlier laboratory findings, hinted at a broader environmental catastrophe that could affect not only coastal wildlife, but also domestic pets and even human populations. Adding to the mounting tension, Olivia Reed, the tenacious investigative journalist, broke another major lead. In a series of interviews with a former employee of the chemical manufacturer responsible for the spill, Olivia uncovered startling allegations. The whistleblower, speaking under the condition of anonymity, claimed that the company had knowingly released chemicals that would disrupt local ecosystems, a tactic designed to downplay the risks by shifting the blame onto natural occurrences. They calculated that the increase in barnacles and parasites would seem like an environmental anomaly, the source confided. But in reality, it was a controlled release, a way to mask deeper violations of environmental regulations. This explosive information not only lent credibility to the suspicions already circulating, but also raised the stakes significantly, as it implicated a major corporation in deliberate environmental harm. In the midst of these revelations, local community leaders convened an emergency meeting at the town hall. The meeting was packed with activists, concerned residents, and representatives from environmental watchdog groups. Heated debates ensued about the potential long-term impacts of the spill. "This isn't just about one injured puppy," argued a passionate environmental advocate. "It's about the health of our entire coastal community. If we ignore these warning signs, who knows how many lives, both animal and human, will be affected." The intense discussion underscored a growing consensus. The chemical spill might be the tip of an iceberg, and unless deeper investigations were launched, the full scope of the damage would remain hidden. Back on the coast, as night settled in, Officer Rivera returned to Maplewood Dog Park. Under the dim light of a flickering street lamp, he observed an eerie stillness. The stray puppy, Bailey, was sleeping soundly beneath the old oak tree, seemingly oblivious to the chaos unfolding around him. Yet, the atmosphere was charged with silent questions and unresolved mysteries. Rivera's eyes scanned the darkness, half expecting to catch a glimpse of a shadowy figure lurking near the water's edge. The tension was almost tangible, a quiet promise that the truth was within reach, even if it required peeling back layers of deception that had protected a corporate secret for far too long. Every new piece of evidence, every whispered rumor, and every anonymous tip added to the complexity of the situation. The community, the rescue team, and local law enforcement were now entangled in a web of intrigue that spanned environmental science, corporate malfeasance, and the raw vulnerability of a wounded animal fighting for survival. The stakes were higher than ever, and the questions grew more urgent. Who was behind the cover-up? How far would they go to keep the truth hidden? And most importantly, what would it take to restore balance to a damaged ecosystem and save the lives it sustained? As the coastal wind picked up and the waves crashed relentlessly against the rocks, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation. The hints of deliberate environmental sabotage and the rising tide of community unrest promised that the next phase of the investigation would force everyone involved to face difficult truths. The mysterious text, the unmarked truck, and the chilling testimony from the whistleblower were all harbingers of the storm that was about to break, one that would reveal whether justice and accountability could prevail over corporate greed and environmental neglect. As the investigation into the chemical spill and its devastating effects on the coastal ecosystem continued to gain momentum, new subplots began to intertwine with the main narrative, drawing in a diverse cast of characters whose lives were now inextricably linked by this unfolding environmental crisis. At the heart of these developments was Dr. Emily Carter, whose determination to save the injured puppy, now nicknamed Bailey, had evolved into a broader mission. Alongside her veterinary team, Dr. Carter started working with environmental scientists, including Dr. Mark Thompson, to track the spill's long-term effects on the local marine life. Their collaboration led to the creation of a joint research initiative that aimed not only to monitor pollutant levels, but also to study how such toxic exposures might be affecting nearby communities. This partnership, though born of necessity, forged an unexpected bond between two fields, veterinary medicine and environmental science, that had rarely intersected before. In one late afternoon meeting at a local university lab, Dr. Thompson confided to Dr. Carter, "Your work with Bailey isn't just about healing one animal. It's opening our eyes to a systemic failure that could have repercussions for all living creatures here." Their conversation set the stage for a series of collaborative efforts that would soon influence local policy discussions. Meanwhile, the local animal shelter, where volunteer Carla Martinez had become increasingly involved, was also feeling the ripple effects. Carla's grassroots awareness campaign had begun to draw the attention of neighboring towns. Reports of similar cases, stray animals with unusual skin lesions and parasite infestations, started coming in from several nearby communities. Inspired by Bailey's story and bolstered by the shelter's growing network, Carla organized a regional workshop on animal rescue and environmental hazards. During one impassioned session, a volunteer from a neighboring town revealed, "We've been seeing more and more animals affected by this, and it's not just a coincidence. Something is very wrong with our environment." This workshop not only increased public awareness, but also helped establish a network of rescue groups and environmental activists, creating a stronger, more connected coalition committed to holding industrial polluters accountable. Back in the precinct, Officer Daniel Rivera was also navigating his own internal and external challenges. His tireless efforts to document every clue, from the cryptic text messages to the unmarked truck sightings, had not only made him a respected figure among some of his colleagues, but had also attracted the attention of a few younger officers. These newer members, inspired by Rivera's unwavering compassion, began to see environmental investigations as part of their duty to protect the community. In informal late-night briefings, Rivera found himself mentoring these officers, emphasizing that true public safety now encompassed both crime fighting and environmental stewardship. "Our duty is evolving," he told one attentive recruit. "When our environment is compromised, so is the safety of our community." This shift in perspective slowly helped bridge the gap between traditional law enforcement and the emerging environmental justice movement. At the community level, local activist Ms. Charlotte Green and investigative journalist Olivia Reed continued to build on the momentum. In a series of town hall meetings, residents shared personal stories about how the deteriorating coastline had affected their lives, from lost livelihoods among local fishermen to health problems among coastal families. One elderly fisherman, his eyes glistening with regret, recounted, "I've seen the ocean change, seen fish disappear. Now, with this spill, I fear it's too late for our way of life." His testimony, among others, sparked fierce debates in public forums. Yet, out of these debates, a sense of solidarity began to emerge as more community members recognized the interconnectedness of environmental health and their own well-being. Olivia Reed's blog, now a hub for community updates and hard-hitting investigative reports, connected these disparate narratives. Through a series of multimedia posts that combined scientific data, personal testimonies, and interviews with insiders, Reed crafted a compelling narrative that not only exposed corporate negligence, but also highlighted the human stories behind the headlines. Her work attracted attention from regional media, further pressuring local authorities to take concrete steps towards an independent investigation. One particularly compelling subplot unfolded when a community college professor, Dr. Linda Morales, an expert in environmental toxicology, reached out to Dr. Carter. Dr. Morales had been researching the long-term impacts of industrial spills on coastal ecosystems and saw a direct link between the recent events and similar patterns observed in other regions. She proposed a joint study that would use Bailey's case as a baseline for measuring broader environmental damage. This academic collaboration added a rigorous scientific dimension to the case, further bolstering the argument for increased regulatory oversight and environmental reforms. As all these subplots converged, the injured puppy, Bailey, remained a silent yet potent symbol of resilience. Each connection, from the collaborative research efforts and regional animal rescue networks to the shifting perspectives within law enforcement and the impassioned community testimonies, reinforced a growing consensus that the crisis affecting Bailey was symptomatic of much larger systemic failures. The combined efforts of the rescue team, environmental scientists, law enforcement, and community activists were beginning to form a formidable front against corporate neglect and environmental degradation. By the time dusk settled once again over the rugged coastline, every group involved, whether motivated by scientific inquiry, compassionate rescue, or community activism, had begun to see that their individual efforts were all parts of a larger puzzle. The connections established during this phase not only deepened the investigation, but also ignited Bailey that together they could push for meaningful change in how industries were held accountable and how local ecosystems were protected. As the investigation continued and the various subplots began to intertwine, the situation around the injured puppy and the chemical spill reached a critical juncture. Tensions escalated among environmental groups, hospital administrators, local law enforcement, and community activists, each with conflicting priorities and mounting pressure to act. The accumulated evidence and passionate testimonies now converged into a dramatic standoff, where the stakes were nothing less than the future health of the local ecosystem and community well-being. Late one overcast evening, a high-stakes meeting was convened at the town hall. Representatives from the Coastal Integrity Coalition, local government officials, environmental scientists led by Dr. Mark Thompson, and community activist Ms. Charlotte Green gathered in a packed room. Heated debates broke out as each faction sought to claim control of the narrative. This chemical spill isn't an isolated incident, it's a symptom of systemic corporate negligence, declared a CIC spokesperson, his voice resonating with both anger and determination. In response, a city council member cautioned, "We must ensure that any investigation doesn't unnecessarily disrupt local industry and jeopardize our economic stability." The clash of interests was palpable, with every side accusing the other of either downplaying or exaggerating the severity of the crisis. Simultaneously, internal conflicts within Riverdale General Hospital reached a boiling point. Dr. Emily Carter, who had passionately defended the allocation of resources for Bailey's treatment, now found herself at odds with hospital management. In a tense meeting held in a cramped administrative office, CFO Mark Reynolds argued, "We cannot afford to divert all our resources to this one high-profile case if it means compromising other critical patient care services." Dr. Carter, however, countered, "This isn't just about one puppy. It's about exposing a dangerous environmental hazard that could impact hundreds, if not thousands, of lives in our community. Ignoring it would make us complicit in a cover-up." The debate left the board divided, with some members increasingly sympathetic to the need for transparency and environmental justice. Officer Daniel Rivera, already emotionally invested in the case, faced mounting pressure within his department as well. During a routine briefing, a veteran officer known for his traditional approach, he stated flatly, "We're here to enforce the law, not to become environmental watchdogs." Rivera's impassioned response, "Public safety now means addressing both crime and environmental hazards," only deepened the divide. The internal friction threatened to destabilize the department's unity, with younger officers rallying behind Rivera's broader vision of public service, while older, more conservative members urged caution. The situation took a dramatic turn when Olivia Reed, the investigative journalist, published a breaking news article revealing new documents that implicated a major chemical manufacturer in the cover-up of the spill. The leaked documents contained internal memos that not only confirmed the accidental nature of the spill, but also hinted at deliberate misrepresentation to avoid regulatory penalties. The explosive report ignited a firestorm of public outrage, and local media outlets began to demand accountability from both the corporation and local government. Social media erupted with hashtags such as Coastal Crisis and Justice for Bailey, further polarizing opinions and fueling protests along the shoreline. Amid this chaos, a critical eyewitness account emerged. During one of his patrols, Officer Rivera encountered a frightened local resident near the tide pools who reported seeing an unmarked truck idling near the industrial facility on several occasions. "I saw it more than once, and always when the water looked off," the resident recalled, voice trembling with fear. This testimony not only corroborated earlier hints of clandestine industrial activity, but also lent a human face to the growing suspicion that the spill might be part of a recurring, deliberate practice to mask environmental violations. At the same time, in the midst of these unfolding crises, the animal shelter faced its own internal strife. Volunteer Carla Martinez, who had spearheaded the regional awareness campaign, was confronted by a group of volunteers who were beginning to worry that the growing focus on corporate malfeasance might divert attention from the immediate needs of injured animals. "We must not lose sight of our primary mission, to care for these vulnerable lives," one volunteer argued, sparking a heated debate that threatened to fracture the shelter's unity. The mounting conflicts, corporate cover-ups, divided priorities among hospital administrators, internal strife in the police department, and even dissent within the animal shelter created an atmosphere of uncertainty and urgency. With every new piece of evidence and every passionate plea heard at public forums, it became clear that the crisis had grown far beyond an isolated incident. The chemical spill, once thought to be a tragic accident, now appeared to be the tip of a massive iceberg of industrial negligence and regulatory failure. As dusk turned into night and a cold wind swept over the coastline, all these divergent forces converged. The community, already divided but deeply affected by the unfolding events, braced itself for the inevitable showdown. In the town hall meeting, voices rose and fell in a cacophony of anger, despair, and determination, as community members demanded that local authorities take swift and uncompromising action. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, one that would force every stakeholder, from the chemical manufacturer and hospital administrators to law enforcement and local activists, to face the consequences of their actions and inactions. In this moment of heightened tension, Officer Rivera, Dr. Carter, and Mrs. Green knew that the next steps could determine not only the fate of Bailey and the injured animals, but also the health and future of the entire coastal community. The time had come to move from heated debates and internal divisions to decisive action, a step that promised to expose deep-seated corruption, mend fractured trust, and ultimately pave the way for lasting change. As the mounting evidence and simmering conflicts reached a fever pitch, the various stakeholders gathered for a decisive meeting at the town hall, a pivotal moment where passionate voices and hard truths were forced into confrontation. In a packed auditorium filled with local activists, environmental experts, community leaders, law enforcement representatives, and concerned residents, the atmosphere was electric with tension and expectation. At the front of the room, Ms. Charlotte Green took the stage with an air of determined urgency. "We have uncovered undeniable proof that a major chemical spill, one that has drastically altered our coastal ecosystem, is not an isolated accident," she declared, her voice resonating across the packed hall. "This spill has triggered an environmental crisis that is not only endangering wildlife, as seen in the plight of our injured puppy, Bailey, but is also affecting human lives and our local economy." Her statement drew murmurs of agreement from the audience, who had long suffered under the weight of industrial negligence. Simultaneously, Dr. Emily Carter, who had led the rescue efforts for Bailey, was invited to share her findings. With a mixture of scientific precision and heartfelt emotion, she presented a series of slides detailing the chemical analysis of water samples, images of barnacle overgrowth, and close-up photographs of the parasites that had infested Bailey. "What we are witnessing," she explained, "is an unnatural amplification of these organisms, directly linked to the chemical residue from an unreported spill by a prominent manufacturer." Her words, supported by stark images and data, challenged the previously held notion that nature's fury was solely to blame. Instead, they pointed to deliberate corporate actions that had unleashed a cascade of environmental harm. As Dr. Carter concluded, a representative from the local police department Officer Daniel Rivera stepped forward. Having been deeply involved since his tearful discovery of Bailey, Rivera's voice now carried a hardened resolve. "I have patrolled these shores night after night, and I've seen things that defy explanation," he said. "Today, I stand before you not just as a law enforcer, but as someone who believes that protecting our community means confronting both human and environmental threats head-on." His plea was met with both applause and cautious nods, especially from the younger officers in attendance, who saw in his words a call to redefine public service. Not all voices in the room were unified, however. A senior official from the chemical manufacturing company, who had been unexpectedly summoned, appeared via video conference. In a measured tone, he attempted to downplay the evidence, stating, "We have always maintained that any releases were within permitted levels, and any observed effects are part of natural fluctuations." His argument, though delivered with corporate composure, was met with immediate rebuttal from a local environmental watchdog representative. "The data clearly shows a correlation between your facility's operations and the dramatic spike in environmental contaminants," the watchdog retorted sharply. "We demand full disclosure and accountability." The heated exchange underscored the high stakes involved and set the stage for a broader investigation. As tensions escalated, the room became a battleground of competing interests. Some community members, fueled by anger over past injustices, demanded immediate regulatory action and severe penalties for the company. Others, still worried about potential economic fallout, urged caution and a balanced approach to protect local jobs. Amid these polarized viewpoints, Mr. Green proposed the formation of an independent oversight committee, comprising community leaders, environmental scientists, and legal experts, to conduct a comprehensive investigation into the spill and its far-reaching impacts. "We must be transparent," she asserted passionately. "Only by shining a light on every dark corner can we Bailey to rebuild trust and ensure that our environment and our community are protected from future harm." A particularly intense moment arose when Officer Rivera shared a critical eyewitness account. A local resident had seen an unmarked truck repeatedly idling near the industrial site in question on several occasions. His testimony lent weight to the growing body of evidence implicating the manufacturer in a deliberate cover-up. "We cannot ignore these testimonies," Rivera argued, "as they suggest a pattern of behavior that goes far beyond a mere accident." His words galvanized the room, drawing support from many who were eager to see justice served. After hours of vigorous debate and the presentation of compelling evidence, the room reached a consensus. The Independent Oversight Committee was to be formed immediately, with a mandate to investigate every aspect of the spill, from the chemical data to internal corporate communications and regulatory compliance. Additionally, the task force agreed to collaborate with local media and environmental agencies, ensuring that the investigation would be as transparent as possible. In a final vote that reflected the collective will of the community, the proposal was unanimously approved. As the meeting concluded, the sense of determination in the room was palpable. Mrs. Green's closing words resonated deeply. "Today, we have taken a stand not only for Bailey, but for every living creature and every community member affected by this tragedy. We will not allow corporate negligence to go unchecked. We will hold those responsible accountable, and we will protect our home, our environment, from further harm." Outside the town hall, as the attendees dispersed into the cool night air, Officer Rivera lingered for a moment. With Bailey tucked gently under his arm, he gazed up at the starry sky, silently promising that the fight for justice would continue until every hidden truth was revealed. The decisions made that night set the stage for a dramatic confrontation with those who had long shielded themselves behind corporate power and bureaucratic indifference, a confrontation that promised to redefine the future of the coastal community. As dusk settled over the rugged coastline and the tide crashed relentlessly against weathered rocks, the entire community braced itself for the moment when all hidden truths would finally come to light. The series of revelations, the chemical spill, the accelerated proliferation of barnacles and parasites, and the mounting evidence of corporate cover-ups had pushed everyone involved to the brink. In every corner of Maplewood and along its battered shores, an electric tension filled the air, setting the stage for a dramatic climax. At the town hall meeting, held in a packed, candlelit auditorium, emotions reached a fever pitch. Community members, environmental activists, local government officials, and representatives from law enforcement all gathered in anticipation of the Independent Oversight Committee's report. The room buzzed with anxious whispers as people exchanged worried glances and shared memories of past losses. Every face in the room reflected the Bailey that justice might finally be served, and the underlying dread of what the truth might reveal. On the stage, Mrs. Charlotte Green, a tireless community activist, took the podium. "We stand here tonight on the precipice of a turning point," she declared, her voice both trembling and resolute. "For too long, our coast has suffered under the weight of industrial negligence and corporate deceit. The chemical spill that endangered this poor puppy, Bailey, is not an isolated tragedy. It is a symptom of a system that has long prioritized profit over people and nature. Tonight, we demand that every responsible party be held accountable." Her words, delivered with fervor, sent a ripple of murmurs throughout the audience. In the midst of the gathering, Officer Daniel Rivera, still visibly affected by the events that had unfolded, stepped forward to share a crucial piece of evidence. "I have witnessed firsthand the mysterious activities near the industrial facility," he announced, his voice resolute despite the tremor of emotion in his eyes. "An unmarked truck, repeated sightings of shadowy figures near the spill site, and a series of anonymous messages all point to deliberate attempts to cover up this disaster. We cannot let these actions remain unchecked." His testimony, bolstered by photographic evidence and corroborated by eyewitness accounts, deepened the tension in the room and solidified the community's demand for full transparency. As the Independent Oversight Committee began to present its preliminary findings, the atmosphere became almost palpable with anticipation. Graphs showed alarming spikes in pollutant levels. Charts detailed the rapid abnormal growth of barnacles on coastal rocks, and comparative images illustrated the stark differences in water quality before and after the spill. Dr. Mark Thompson, the marine biologist involved in the investigation, spoke with urgency. "These results leave no room for doubt. The spill has caused an ecological imbalance that is affecting not only marine life, but also our local communities. The chemical residue we detected is far beyond natural variation. It is a human-made crisis." His words echoed through the hall, reinforcing the gravity of the situation. Amid these scientific revelations, Olivia Reed's live broadcast on a local news channel added another layer to the tension. The investigative journalist's voice, calm yet impassioned, filled the screen as she recapped the unfolding story. "What we are witnessing tonight," she stated, "is the convergence of environmental science, community outcry, and corporate malfeasance. The evidence against the chemical manufacturer is overwhelming, and the people of our community demand action. This is not just about one injured puppy, it's about the future of our entire coastline." The broadcast reached households across the region, sparking widespread discussion and increasing pressure on local authorities to act decisively. Outside the town hall, as the meeting reached its climax, protests and vigils formed along the shoreline. Residents, armed with placards demanding justice and clean water, gathered near the beach. The sounds of passionate chants and the rhythmic beating of drums underscored the collective resolve to hold the polluters accountable. In these moments, the once quiet Maplewood community was transformed into a unified front, determined to reclaim its environment and ensure that no life, human or animal, would suffer in silence again. Back inside the town hall, the tension peaked as a final, powerful statement was made. Miss Green's voice rose above the murmur. "Tonight, we set aside our differences and stand together for truth. We will not allow corporate greed to silence our environment, and we will not let this tragedy define our future. We are prepared to fight for every living creature that calls this coast home." The hall erupted in applause and cheers, a cathartic release of years of pent-up frustration and sorrow. As the meeting drew to a close, and the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, every attendee left with a heavy yet baleful heart. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation, a moment when the full force of community, scientific evidence, and public demand would converge, to deliver the final blow to those responsible for the environmental disaster. The injured puppy, Bailey, still sleeping peacefully beneath the ancient oak tree at Maplewood Dog Park, had become the emblem of their struggle, a silent witness to a battle for justice that promised to reshape the future of their cherished coastline. As the first light of dawn broke over the tumultuous coastline, the long, painful struggle converged into one final, electrifying moment. The community, the rescue team, environmental activists, and law enforcement, all driven by months of accumulating evidence and heart-wrenching testimony, gathered for a decisive public showdown at Maplewood Dog Park. This was the moment when hidden truths would no longer be allowed to fester in secrecy. In a large, air-packed tent erected near the ancient oak tree where the injured puppy, Bailey, had spent so many nights, a press conference was about to begin. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and raw emotion. Local media cameras flashed as community leaders, environmental experts, and representatives from the Independent Oversight Committee took their places on stage. The air buzzed with whispers and the rhythmic murmur of determined voices. Every eye was fixed on the podium, where Ms. Charlotte Green, a tireless community activist, stepped forward, her face a mixture of resolve and sorrow. "Today," she began, her voice steady and ringing clear across the crowd, "we confront a truth that has long been hidden by corporate greed and bureaucratic indifference. The chemical spill that has ravaged our coast and injured our precious Bailey was not a random act of nature. It was the result of a deliberate cover-up by those who placed profit above people and the environment. We are here to demand accountability and to ensure that our community, our marine life, and our future are protected." As Mrs. Green's words reverberated through the tent, Dr. Emily Carter, the veterinarian who had led the rescue, joined her on stage. With a series of compelling slides behind her, Dr. Carter detailed the extraordinary treatment efforts that had saved Bailey, showing close-up images of the barnacle clusters removed from its fur, microscopic slides of the unusual parasites, and the chemical analysis that linked the injuries to a toxic spill from a major industrial facility. "These images and data leave no room for doubt," Dr. Carter declared, her voice thick with emotion. "The residue we detected is far beyond any natural occurrence. This spill and the subsequent cover-up have not only endangered this little life but have jeopardized our entire coastal ecosystem." The tension reached its apex when Officer Daniel Rivera took the microphone. Known for his impassioned dedication since his initial, tearful discovery of Bailey, Rivera now recounted his own experiences, his relentless patrols along the shoreline, his eyewitness account of an unmarked truck idling suspiciously near the spill site, and the cryptic text messages that warned of hidden dangers. "I have seen things that defy explanation," he said, his voice breaking yet resolute. "I stand before you not only as a law enforcer, but as a member of this community who will no longer allow our environment and our future to be sacrificed for corporate profits." At that moment, a dramatic twist unfolded on the big screen behind the speakers. Olivia Reed, the investigative journalist whose relentless coverage had galvanized public opinion, introduced a series of leaked internal memos from the chemical manufacturer responsible for the spill. The documents, displayed in stark detail, revealed that executives had knowingly downplayed the incident and deliberately misrepresented data to regulatory agencies. A hush fell over the audience as one particularly damning memo was read aloud. "Maintain silence at all costs. Public disclosure will result in irreparable financial damage." The revelation ignited a chorus of gasps and murmurs of outrage from every corner of the tent. With the evidence laid bare and the emotional testimonies echoing in the room, Miss Green called for immediate action. "We have reached a crossroads," she proclaimed. "Will we allow this cover-up to continue, or will we stand united to demand justice for our community, our wildlife, and for every living creature affected by this industrial negligence?" The room erupted in a surge of applause and determined shouts. Signs reading "Justice for Bailey" and "Clean Coasts Now" waved high among the gathered crowd, symbolizing a unified call for accountability. In a climactic moment that brought everything into sharp focus, the Independent Oversight Committee announced its decision, a comprehensive, public investigation into the chemical spill and its long-term impacts would be launched immediately, with full cooperation from local authorities and stringent oversight on the implicated corporation. "This is our promise to you," announced the committee chair, her voice steady yet fierce. "We will leave no stone unturned until every detail of this environmental disaster is exposed and those responsible are held accountable." As the meeting reached its crescendo, the emotional impact of the day was palpable. Officer Rivera, still holding Bailey in his arms, gazed out over the sea of resolute faces. "This little puppy, Bailey, has become a symbol of our struggle," he said softly, his eyes glistening with tears. "Let it remind us that every act of cruelty, be it from nature exacerbated by human greed, can be overcome by our determination to protect what is sacred. Today we fight not just for one life, but for the future of our entire coastline." The decisive statements, the damning evidence, and the outpouring of community resolve marked the climax of a long-fought battle. In that transformative moment, the collective voice of Maplewood rose in unison, a powerful declaration that the days of silent suffering and unchecked corporate malfeasance were over. With the first light of a new dawn casting a baleful glow over the tide-washed shores, the community and its protectors stood united, ready to rebuild and ensure that the tragedy that had once threatened to decimate their coastal home would pave the way for a future defined by justice, transparency, and unwavering Bailey. As the first rays of a baleful dawn began to light the rugged coastline, the tumultuous events that had rocked the community of Maplewood slowly gave way to a cautious sense of renewal. What started as a desperate rescue of a battered puppy named Bailey had transformed into a watershed moment, one that exposed corporate malfeasance, sparked environmental advocacy, and united a community long divided by neglect and silence. In the weeks following the dramatic public showdown at Maplewood Dog Park, sweeping changes rippled through every facet of the local ecosystem and beyond. The Independent Oversight Committee, now fully supported by community leaders, law enforcement, and environmental scientists, launched a comprehensive investigation into the chemical spill. Their inquiry revealed not only the dire ecological consequences, unprecedented barnacle overgrowth, and a surge in parasitic infections, but also a trail of corrupt internal communications and cover-up attempts by the implicated chemical manufacturer. Local government officials, pressured by mounting public outrage and backed by robust scientific evidence, took decisive steps to hold the corporation accountable. Regulatory agencies were mobilized to enforce stricter environmental standards along the coastline, and new oversight measures were introduced to prevent future incidents. As news of these reforms spread, the community began to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Residents who had once felt powerless now witnessed tangible change, proof that even the darkest moments could pave the way for a brighter, cleaner future. At the heart of this transformation was the unyielding determination of individuals like Dr. Emily Carter and Officer Daniel Rivera. Dr. Carter, whose tireless efforts had saved Bailey from a grim fate, continued to lead initiatives that bridged the gap between animal care and environmental conservation. In partnership with marine biologists and local universities, she launched outreach programs aimed at monitoring coastal health and educating the public about the interconnection between industrial practices and wildlife well-being. Her work not only helped to secure further funding for environmental research, but also inspired a new generation of compassionate professionals dedicated to protecting vulnerable ecosystems. Officer Rivera, whose emotional journey had begun with tears at the sight of a suffering puppy, emerged as a symbol of resilience and reform within the police department. His public testimony and advocacy for a broader vision of public safety, one that encompassed environmental stewardship, helped shift departmental priorities. Rivera's colleagues, once skeptical of his emotional involvement, gradually embraced the idea that community protection meant addressing all facets of public welfare, including the health of the environment. His nightly patrols along the coastline became less about routine enforcement and more about being a guardian for both people and nature. The local animal shelter, too, experienced a surge in community support. Spearheaded by volunteer Carla Martinez, the shelter expanded its operations and established partnerships with other rescue organizations across the region. They organized educational workshops, clean-up drives, and fundraising events to ensure that more injured animals received timely care. The shelter's success became a testament to the power of grassroots activism, demonstrating that, even in the face of systemic neglect, individual compassion could ignite collective action. Media outlets, led by investigative journalist Olivia Reed, played a crucial role in uniting the community and sustaining momentum for reform. Through a series of in-depth reports, Reed chronicled the unfolding events, from the discovery of the chemical spill to the dramatic public confrontation, and captured the emotional essence of the community's struggle. Her multimedia features, which blended scientific data, personal testimonials, and vivid imagery, not only informed the public, but also kept the pressure on authorities and corporate executives to maintain transparency and accountability. Community forums and town hall meetings became regular events, providing a platform for residents to share their experiences and ideas for safeguarding their environment. In these gatherings, individuals of all ages, from elderly fishermen to young activists, voiced their collective determination to build a sustainable future. One elderly resident, whose lifelong connection to the coast had been marred by industrial neglect, remarked during a forum, "I used to feel that our voices were drowned out by corporate dollars. But now, I see that together we can make a difference." Her words resonated deeply, fueling further community engagement and inspiring local policy changes. As the months passed, Maplewood's coastline began to show signs of recovery. The enforcement of stricter environmental regulations and the rigorous investigation into the spill gradually improved water quality, and local marine life started to rebound. The transformation was slow but undeniable. Each small improvement symbolized a collective victory over the forces that had once threatened to silence the vulnerable. In the quiet moments at Maplewood Dog Park, where Bailey still slept beneath the ancient oak tree, the community found a powerful symbol of resilience. The little puppy, once injured by nature's harsh elements exacerbated by corporate negligence, had become a beacon of Bailey and a rallying point for change. Every time a resident passed by, they were reminded that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, compassion and unity could prevail. As we close this chapter, we invite you to join us in celebrating the courage and determination that transformed a single tragic event into a movement for environmental justice and community healing. If you believe in the power of compassion to drive change, subscribe to our channel, share this story with friends and family, and leave a comment telling us how you've seen acts of kindness change the world around you. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories that remind us that even in our darkest moments, Bailey is never truly lost, and that together we can build a better future for all.